Awesome. Well, my next guest on the Lax Goalie Rap podcast is Brandon Davis. He's a coach at Georgetown College. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hey, appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. For those that don't know you, Brandon, could you give a little, little intro to yourself?
Yeah, sure. I was born and raised up in Connecticut. I was one of the lucky few that got to grow up where the sport's real big. Started playing relatively young, about fourth grade, when my family and I decided that baseball was not going to pay the bills. And then played all through middle school, got to high school. My high school didn't have a team, so we started the team there. I actually, in high school, was a midfielder turned defender, but I was our backup goalie. Our goalie, Harry Levesque, great goalie, went on to play at Bryant. But Harry was definitely a football player playing lacrosse and loved to come out and hit people. So there were quite a few times where he had to go sit in the penalty box. So that's how I got thrown in. I was the only kid on the team that had any kind of goalie experience at all, coming from a hockey background. And so that was it. Moved on to I had kind of a unique recruiting experience, and that led me to the University of Louisville. I played there, started playing defense, and once again, we needed a goalie. We had one goalie quit, one transfer, and one couldn't pass the physical fitness test. So coach goes, all right, who wants to step in cage? And I was the only knuckle brain that raised my hand. So that got me back in the cage and made a career out of it since.
Nice. Going back to those first days of playing goalie, I always like to ask goalies, do you kind of remember the first time jumping in goal, that story or some of those feelings that came along with that?
Oh, absolutely. It was a mad dash because no one had really thought about it until we needed the goalie in a game. So it was quick timeout, run over to the sideline. I threw his chest pad on over my jersey, over my shoulder pads, threw his helmet on, grabbed my mouthpiece, and jumped in the cage. It was my junior year against Granby High School, and I actually had a 66% save percentage in that game. So one hit me square in the chest. That was my first save, so it gives you a little bit of confidence. Let one go 5-hole, and then I actually made a legitimate, actual goalie save with a nice outlet going up the field, and then promptly held the ball, killed the penalty, and I got the heck out of Dodge.
That sounds very similar to my origin story in the goal. So I had been playing goalie for like just a week or two. I was a midi, right? Been playing goalie for a week or two, and our starting goalie gets a penalty. And so I was in the same situation. Now, granted, I had a week or two of practice, so I wasn't going in as raw as you, but first shot, boom, hit me square in the mask. Second shot, I was standing on the pipe, right? And the guy tries to just sneak it near side, and I didn't even move, hit me in the leg. And so for the entire year, I led the league in save percentage at a clip of 1,000, saving them all.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, it was awesome. Me and my buddies in where I live, we printed that out and framed it on the wall, like Damon Wilson, 1,000% save percentage.
There you go.
So cool. Well, for you then, when, you started to actually learn the position, what was that like? Like, what were some of the things that, some of the challenges that you ran up against, and how did you actually go about learning the position?
So on our team, we had two great coaches, Greg Greenhall and Greg Harris, but very much offensive and defensive minded. And there wasn't really a whole lot of goalie help. So I was very much self-taught, a lot of time on what was the very little YouTube at that point. But I was lucky enough that I also worked in the local lacrosse store in Louisville, Kentucky. And that was kind of like the hangout for lacrosse people in the city. And especially come noon, 2:00 on a Saturday, that was one of the only places at the time you could go and watch lacrosse games because we paid for all the extra packages. So if there was a game on TV, we had it. And we had a little lounge in the back of the store, and that's where everybody went. And I picked a lot of stuff up from watching those guys play. One of your recent guests, the Navy goalie, and then Kip Turner, watched a lot of those guys. So, but yeah, the majority of it was self-taught. Luckily from, other sports, I already understood kind of communication and playing angles and stuff like that. But as far as the actual drills and things like that, it was a lot of time, hey, I'm going to go over there and do what I need to do and let me know when you need me.
Yeah. 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 Wow. What a cool setup. Having all those games in the back.
It was nice.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds pretty cool. Sounds like a place I would love to hang out. um, you mentioned playing, I think you said you played ice hockey.
Yeah, when I was real
Yeah.
young, yeah.
When you were real young. Okay. As a goalie or just as a regular, like,
A little bit of everything. At that point,
okay,
it was like everybody. I mean, it's like catcher in baseball. Like everybody gets a shot at it.
got it.
But I did okay with it for some reason. I've always been gravitated to what my high school coach called the position. I wanted to be the goalie, the catcher, the quarterback, the goalie, not a receiver, not
Mm-hmm.
a lineman or whatever. Um, it's always kind of had that natural draw. But yeah, I mean, I was real young, but I was at least comfortable kind of with the idea of stepping in front of something being shot at me relatively quickly.
Yeah, I love how you just phrased that right there. The position. It is the goalie. You're not an attackman or a defender, a midi. You're the goalie,
Yep.
right? Man, I love that. That's awesome. So yeah, I just had Matt Russell on the last episode. Awesome, awesome guy. You guys should check that one out. I had Kip Turner on. I'd have to look up what episode that was. It was a while ago. What were some of those things that you saw those guys do that you then tried to incorporate into your own game?
I think the reason why I gravitated towards them was they were both very aggressive style goalies. That was also still back in the days of, watching Doc and all those guys that were more of your traditional type that I'm going to stand in the cage, take up a whole bunch of room and make you beat me, where Kip and Russell they weren't afraid to come out of the crease. And coming from somebody that, except for a few games in high school, played midfield and LSM and was on the rope unit and stuff like that. I was comfortable out of the cage, so I had no problem. If I made a save and there was a rebound out in front of me, I had no problem coming out of the crease and taking it straight up the middle until I found somebody I could get it to. I was okay with if somebody's in my hands when I'm trying to throw. Well, I've played with this since I was in fourth grade. So watching them learn how to, or watching them and learning how to use your aggressiveness when you should, and more importantly, when you shouldn't. When should you have a patient mind and sit and wait? Or when should you come out and when you've got that attacker that's right on the pipe that's wide open and he's getting the pass, when you come out and hit him. So goalies and even like teaching slide defenses and stuff like that, or even when to go with cutters, was called the squirrel theory. And it's, if a squirrel's trying to cross the road, if he doesn't go and doesn't change his mind, he's fine. If he goes, doesn't hesitate and just goes, doesn't change his mind, he's fine. But when he goes halfway and kind of gets caught in the middle, that's when he gets in trouble. So that just got instilled in me very, very quickly, was if you're going to go, go. But learning when to go and when not to was pretty critical for me.
Yeah. It's a tough thing to describe, like when a goalie asks you, well, when do I go? When do I not go? And it's kind of like, you gotta get enough experience to know, like, do I have, I don't know what the right answer is, like a 75% chance of like getting this ground ball or of winning the possession based on the risk I'm going to do of leaving the crease. So I think with experience, you tend to be able to read those situations a lot better. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
the goalies that we work with now, I'm real big on numbers and stats and stuff like that, almost to the point of using analytics, where, if you've got a 1-on-0 with the goalie point blank range, goalie saves that 7 to 10% of the time. So if you use that number versus, what are my chances? Like you said, what's the percentage of, if I come out and play this person, they're going to get a good shot off? It's more than 7 to 10%. Well, then it's better to go out and play them than it is to sit there and wait for the shot. Yeah. So we put a lot of different situations to the goalies we work with now, and it's been really successful for us.
I love it. I want to talk quite a bit about those stats later on. So if I forget it, try and remind me. But so as you were, as you were sort of learning this position, many goalies struggle with being afraid of the ball, like flinching. It's just like a natural thing. Like we're not, as humans, meant to stand in front of these fast shots, these rubber projectiles with very little padding. Was that something you dealt with And if so, like, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's a goalie in the world besides maybe Doherty, maybe, that's not in some way kind of scared of the ball, right? Or at least has the natural reaction. Maybe not, scared is the wrong way to use it, but realizes that something's coming, and has a little bit of a flinch. And I absolutely dealt with it. And I remember the exact moment when I went from the oh no mentality to the bring it mentality, which was it was my junior year playing the University of Kentucky. We were playing at their place. It was an absolute whiteout condition. You couldn't see anything. And there was a guy that had a little step down from the island, and he ripped it sidearm right over my head, and I ducked. And one of our midfielders, Ryan Smith, came up to me and made a comment that's not suitable for this podcast. And it shook me out of it. And since then, anytime I stepped in the cage, it was just like the goalie book, Thinking Outside the Crease. It was the mindset of, as soon as you see that ball come out, cross the shooting strings coming out of the stick, it was, say to yourself, bring it, attack the ball. Yeah, it's not going to feel great, but I'd rather have a little bit of pain and make a save than have the feeling of having to turn and rake, as Quint likes to put it.
Yeah. I have that book right here on my shelf, for those that are watching this. Awesome book. And that bring it mentality.
Every single one of my goalies that comes in, I make them read it. Every one.
Awesome. Love it. Any other books you make them read? Just out of curiosity.
As far as a goalie perspective, not really. We do have some other ones that we make the team read. I think one of the best ones that is incredibly applicable for goalies is called the Captain Class. And what it does is there's this gentleman, or a kind of a think group that developed this algorithm to come up with the best sports teams and or athletes in the history of sports. And they had this whole big thing on what it needed. And the majority of the school, or the teams that most people would think of when they think the best ever, are not on that list. So, like, everybody thinks, the early 90s Chicago Bulls, not on the list. The Patriots dynasty, not on the list. It's teams that did something that was revolutionary, never done before. So yeah, the Bulls were great, but the Celtics did it in the 70s. And how each one of those teams, there was a very specific linchpin that helped them be successful and helped keep the team accountable. And it's everything from like the 70s Celtics to the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team, to like the Greek Olympic track team in the 20s, all these different kinds of things. And it really dives into how to be a great leader on the team without necessarily having to be the best player, the all-star, the loudest, all those different kinds of things, which a lot of times, let's face it, the goalie has to fill that role. Yeah, we're loud because we talk a lot, but personality-wise, are we always the one that commands the room when we walk in? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But without having that great person between the pipes, both physically and mentally, it makes it a lot harder for teams to succeed. So that's one I highly, highly recommend. Love it.
What was it called again?
The Captain Class.
Captain Class. I'm going to give that one a read for sure. What are, not to put you on the spot, but like, what's one way that me as a goalie, I can, you learn from that book, I can be a leader, even if I'm not like the best physical athlete out there?
I would say the hardest to do, but the most beneficial, is to hold team members accountable. So yeah, as a goalie, like when one goes in, everybody looks at us. It doesn't matter whether it's a grip and rip it from a step inside the restraining line, or it's a 1-on-0 and a fast break that the guy just makes you look silly. But be able to have the ability to know when you have to hold somebody accountable for on the field, whether it's, hey, this defender missed the second slide and left somebody sitting right open in front, or off the field or in practice. If you see, an attacker that's going half speed and shooting drills and you're just, seeing popcorn all day, to be able to call them out on it. Because yeah, sure. Is it going to make you look better in practice? Okay. But if your team wants to be successful, you need that attacker getting as many good touches as you can. So being able to hold teammates accountable, I think is the easiest or the hardest thing to do, but is by far the most beneficial.
Yeah, that's interesting. Accountability is definitely a challenging one because at a certain point, like, there's tact to it. Like you can't be a young freshman on the team and just start like yelling at a senior. You have to have a little bit of tact, right? You need to hold them accountable, but like, your example of an attackman not bringing it in a shooting drill, for example, like, yeah, at that point, I think it's perfectly acceptable for a freshman goalie to say, come on, I know you got it. I know you can bring it better than that, and kind of like talk trash in that friendly way, but at the same time, like encouraging him. So that's a real interesting one, but I love it because when you hold people accountable, even if it's like, let's say it's a drill, you're doing sprints, right? And you see someone slacking it off. If you're a freshman, like, I would hold them accountable by like encouraging, like, come on, I know we can do better than that. Like, well, we're not ripping into him and insulting him the way you might challenge someone if you're a senior and there's a freshman doing that. But it's a really interesting one. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah, the message is 100% dictated by who's receiving it, not
Yeah.
necessarily who's saying it. Um, so like we use this example all the time when we're working with our goalies on how to communicate with the defense after a goal is scored. Is we've got a really really good defender. I honestly think she's one of the best in the country. Our tagline for her is she can guard Superman even if he's in the phone booth.
Oh,
And we have some rules on defense. Never get beat underneath on a crease roll, so on and so forth. And so we use examples like, hey, if Jessie gets beat underneath on a crease roll, she knows she got beat. You don't have to walk up and make her feel tiny. It's, hey,
yeah.
you got it next time. Just remember, like, keep that trail foot a little bit lower. Where if somebody's making, if Jessie makes a mental mistake, yeah, well, okay, maybe we can come down a little bit harder. We can, be a little bit more firm. Hey, you need to make sure you do this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the message is absolutely interpreted by the person receiving it, and that's what makes it so hard is how to cater that message differently for everybody, not only everybody on the team, but in different situations.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. So you mentioned at the University of Louisville, you had sort of an interesting recruiting experience. What was so interesting about it?
So it wasn't at the U of L, Louisville. It was how I got there.
Got it.
So I was recruited to play LSM. I won't use school names. That's not nice. But I was recruited by a D1 school up north, where I was from. It was actually where my dad went. Super excited. Going to be a legacy. 2 weeks after I committed, and this is still in the old school days, so I committed after my junior year.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks after I committed, the coach left to start a new D1 team. He wanted me to go with him. I was all for it. The school was a lot harder to get into, and I didn't have the best grades. So they said to go to Louisville for a semester and then transfer in. And then in that time, I kind of realized the difference between the guy that was sitting at my kitchen table versus the coach. And I wasn't sure I wanted to play for that guy for 4 years. And I'll just leave it there. So at that point, Louisville's a club program, but they had just announced they were starting the women's D1 team. So the school essentially fully funded the club programs. So we used like the school's coach buses and we, like I said, we had legitimate coaches and all that kind of stuff. So even though it was club, it was still, pretty competitive. We still had 35-man travel rosters. So we were ranked my senior year, we were ranked 9th in the country. So we were for division two,
Yeah.
but we were still really, really competitive. So,
Nice.
but yeah, that's, I am a big proponent of when you're in the recruiting process, you need to see the coach, the school, the team in all aspects. Anybody can put on a pretty face for, a dinner or on your kitchen table, but what's that person going to be like when, not only when things aren't going well,
Mm-hmm.
but when, when you're kicking somebody's doors in and you're up by 20, is the coach still actively involved in the game? Are they turning around, cutting it up with the people on the sidelines? What does that coach look like in a good day of practice, bad day of practice? So you need to see all of that before you make a commitment. So unfortunately, I learned my lesson the hard way. So I try to make sure as many people get to see as much as they can before they make that jump.
Yeah. How do you recommend kids do that? Is it just, when you go and visit that school, like just paying really close attention to all aspects of the coach, or is there something else?
I think that's part of it. I think, and unfortunately, with the way the recruiting rules work right now, it's difficult, even with COVID. D1 is still on they're in a dead period, so you can't,
Right.
speak with anybody on campus. But you need to go and see what a lift looks like, what a practice looks like, if you can, obviously. See try to go to a game. Luckily now, pretty much every team in the country has games that are webcast. If you watch the webcast and you can hear the coach screaming and yelling at everybody, there's nothing wrong with that. But is that somewhere you want to play? Is that something you want to play for?
Right.
And then the other thing is talking to people that have played there. In this day of social media, pretty much everybody's reachable, via, Instagram DM or whatever it is. You can talk to players and find out what they're really like. So, but absolutely doing your research just as much as college coaches are doing their research on you to see if you're a good fit for the program, on the field, off the field, in the classroom. You need to do your research to make sure that program is a good fit for you.
I love it. Yeah, I was just taking some notes there. That was awesome. So basically, to recap, like, as a kid going through the recruiting process, check out a lift, check out a game, check out a practice, and references. Find someone that's played for that coach, and see if you can get them on the horn and chat about it. That's great advice right
Yeah.
there.
Ideally, I would talk to more than a few people, more than one person.
Yeah.
Ideally a couple, because it doesn't matter whether the coach is the best coach in the world, and the nicest person that's going to be your best friend. You can find somebody that doesn't like them, that didn't fit their style. Even if you have the nicest coach that never raises their voice or anything like that, there was the person that wanted to be pushed really, really hard that wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
and they're upset.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
make sure you talk to a couple people, because you don't want one person's perspective to really sway you. Take everything with a grain of salt, but I would make sure you talk to people that know the coach really well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's different coaching styles. I mean, I played for Coach Joe Proud, and he was he was a Duke All-American, and he was very, he was very disciplinarian. Like he pushed us hard, and like kind of like, Jim Beardmore, that style of coaching. Like they're very passionate about the game. They love you as a person, but like if you mess up, like they're going to be very in your face about that, and push you really hard. And for some folks, like they love that. And some folks like they just like, I can't take it. I'm not having any fun. So, understand what style you are and make sure you get into a program that is a good fit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. And then, so when you were doing the recruiting, like, I mean, this is a little bit before the current rules, but were you making were you making tapes, sending them to coaches? Like what did that look like for you?
No, back in those days, so I graduated high school in 2004. So a lot of it was playing in Connecticut. It was the Nutmeg games. I never played club. I made the junior and senior all-star teams. So in Connecticut, they're called the Super Juniors and Super Seniors. So that's actually where I got seen for the first time. But those were the old days where, and I still, jumping up on my platform real quick, this whole flashy equipment, I honestly think started with my generation, because back in those days, we didn't have nice uniforms. Everything was reversible penny. And everybody had, maybe some blue or red gloves, but pretty much everybody's gloves were black. Everybody's head was white with white mesh, unless you dyed it yourself. But back then it was, hey coach, I'm going to be, I'm playing in Super Juniors. I'm number 27, but we would get like fluorescent orange tape and wrap it around our gloves, or wrap it around our cleats, or, put a stripe down our helmet or something like that. So you could say, hey, I'm going to be the one with the fluorescent orange gloves on. A lot easier to find fluorescent orange gloves than it is number 27.
Right.
But I think that's, the companies saw kids doing this and were like, oh, well, if they want fluorescent orange gloves, we'll give them fluorescent orange gloves. But yeah, that was pretty much it. At that point, there was still very little email. I had an email address, but I'm couldn't tell you if I knew how to log into it when I was a junior in high school.
Yeah.
So everything was still letters and phone calls and that kind of stuff.
Got it. So you're now the head coach of at Georgetown College on the women's side, which I want to get to that story, like how you got there in a second, but kind of sticking with this theme of recruiting. If I'm a sophomore women's goalie and I want to play at Georgetown College, what would you recommend that I do?
So, sorry, you kind of cut out there. You're a sophomore goalie, like being recruited, or a sophomore goalie here?
You're a sophomore goalie in high school, so in the recruiting process.
Okay. Just get yourself on film, period. And nowadays the big thing is to create these recruiting social medias and, to have your own Instagram and then like first and last name, graduation year, another Instagram handle. A lot of coaches don't look at that. You can make, I could take a kid that's never played in the cage, work with him for 5 minutes, stick him in a cage for a day for 3 or 4 games, and I could come up with a 3-minute highlight to make it look like they're an All-American. And good coaches can see past that. What we want to see is, I want to see the saves you can make, but I also want to see how you communicate with your defense. I don't want to see, if you send me a clip, I don't want it to be the 1 second before the save, and the 1 second after the save. I want to see a game. I want to see an entire possession. So what we actually tell our recruits to do, if we really want to see him and we haven't been able to see him at tournaments, is videotape an entire game. Just focus the camera on, like, and girls lacrosse in the fan, the critical scoring area, and just upload the entire game to YouTube and send me the YouTube link. That's it. Cool. It's free. You don't have to pay for a recruiting service. But probably, just play as much as you can while not burning yourself out, because burnout is real, especially for somebody that or a position that has the mental ups and downs of being a goaltender, and film it. So that's the biggest thing. A lot of good goalie coaches, once you get to college, we're not really as concerned about your style, unless it's, aggressive coming out of the cage or more stationary staying in the crease. We can kind of fit a defense as long as you kind of work in our defense. We can make the defense work around you. But like all of my goalies that I have here, all 3 of them, their footwork has completely changed since they got to me. And I'm not saying their footwork was bad. It was just, we found something that was more efficient for them. So I think that's probably the best advice I can give. Besides being very proactive in the actual recruiting process, send emails, send text messages. With the differences in recruiting rules, some coaches will be able to respond. Some won't. That doesn't mean they don't want you. It just means, maybe they can't respond. Maybe they got your text message in the middle of practice and forgot. So just be diligent.
Cool. So after you ended up playing all 4 years at the University of Louisville, is that right?
Yeah. No, our freshman year I played defense, but then I actually came back for my junior year was ended kind of early with a knee injury. So I actually came back for a super senior year. And so that year I actually didn't play goalie. We had a really, really, really good goalie come in. And he by far gave us a better chance at winning. This is a guy that was like 3-time All-State, just incredibly talented goalie. So I went back to playing LSM. So my sophomore, junior, and first senior year, I was in the cage.
Yeah. Did you have like how did that impact your LSM abilities, having spent like a good amount of time in the goal?
Oh, I understood the defense so much better. And so one of the sayings that I learned from our defensive coordinator, or our head coach that ran our defense in college, was in college, the goal of the defense is not to stop shots. Very rarely we've ever shut anybody out. I have yet to see a college game, boys or men's side, women's side, from club to D1. I've yet to see a college game where there was not a single shot in a game.
Right.
So it's not necessarily stopping the shots. It's giving up shots the goalie wants to see, and then seeing it from the goalie perspective. I absolutely adhered to that. I knew where I was good, what shots I wanted to see, what shots I didn't want to see. And then going back out onto the field and playing LSM and a little bit of close, it made it a lot easier for me to understand. Like I always knew, hey, okay, I'm going to steer this guy down to the side, keep him in the alley, stuff like that. But then actually understanding why I was doing it made it so much easier and actually a lot more instinctual. I didn't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Love it. So then how did you end up as the coach of Georgetown?
So all through college, I was coaching boys high school. I was an assistant coach at Kentucky Country Day. And then there was a coaching staff change. So I was just going to officiate that year. I didn't have a place to coach. And the other captain at Louisville, his girlfriend at the time, they're now married, was coaching a women's team at a private school there in Louisville. And she was like, hey, I need some goalie help. You want to come out? You can be the varsity assistant, but work with all the goalies in the program. So, yeah, sure. Great. We'll do that. And we did okay. We were 8-8 that year, lost in the Sweet 16. And then at the end of the year, she was starting her own business. So she had to leave. And so the AD comes to me and says, we don't have another coach. You're the coach now. Okay, I guess I better learn women's lacrosse, huh? So I was there for 4 more years. We did pretty well. We won a couple state championships. And then just one random Saturday morning in December of 2012, I get a phone call from the athletic director at Georgetown. They're like, we're starting a program. We need a coach. Would you be willing to come down and look at the school? Georgetown's about an hour away from where I was living. So, yeah, sure. Really I had no intentions of coaching in college. I was happy where I was, but they sold me. So we were starting the program here. So I finished the 2013 season at Sacred Heart, commuting an hour each way every day. I'd come out here, do some recruiting, go back, coach a whole bunch of practices because we had about 120 girls in the program at that point with 4 teams. And then in July of 2013, I said goodbye to Sacred Heart, and here I am.
Love it. Awesome. Congratulations. That's great. Going back to kind of when you were training goalies, how would you describe, how you train goalies? If I come to you as just brand new goalie, this raw ball of clay, how do you mold me into an elite goalie?
So one of the things that I hang my hat on when coaching goalies is I just want to take what you do well and make you phenomenal at it. So I've been lucky enough to coach 4 different All-American goalies between Sacred Heart. I had 2 there and then 2 more here at Georgetown. And only one of them had actually had goalie training before I started working with them. 2 of them had never played lacrosse or played goalie before at all. And so what I would do for the first week or 2 is not even put a stick in their hand, just throw tennis balls to them, not even at them, just to them, and see what they did. Are they more of a hand style goalie? Are they more of a foot style goalie? Are they going to sit back and rely on their hands to make the save, or are they going to try to get their body in front of it naturally? And because then that dictates what coaching style or what goalie style we play. If they're a hand style goalie, where their body's not really going to move, well, now we're going to play a little bit higher arc. If they're a foot style goalie where they're going to really step and be aggressive and try to move their body, well, now we play a little flatter arc so we can step and take away angles. So we would normally start with that, and then we put a stick in their hands and get them in a stance. And probably half their time was in the cage, but we'd also spend half the time having them play defense so they understand what's going on in front of them, because I feel that you really can't communicate, which is arguably one of the most important things for a goalie to do besides actually saving it. I feel it's a lot harder for you to communicate with the defense if you don't know why you're telling them what you're telling them. So, but then after that, it's, we do quite a bit of hand-eye stuff, just getting them comfortable. We would try to get them out of their comfort zone. So I'm a firm believer in, like, when you warm the goalies up, they should not be the goal shouldn't be in the crease, because then you start getting comfortable with, you can look and see where you are in the crease physically by seeing the crease. So every day we'd move the goal around and warm you up in a different spot, facing a different direction. You can't use, a light poles, a land marker and stuff like that. And then just a whole lot of tennis ball drills. Is, like I said, every goalie at some point flinches. So when there's a tennis ball, you're a whole lot less likely. So at that point, now you're getting out of the drill what I want you to get out of the drill, not just worrying about whether or not it's going to hurt if you catch one, off the shin.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about moving the goal all around. So you can't really use marks on the crease or like you said, the landmark where I know if I see that tree and I'm lined up with that tree, I know I'm at the 45. Just getting comfortable, with your positioning without those marks is, I think, awesome drill.
So we do that. We even today we drill that every day, and then we for game days we actually kind of go and do the opposite. So one of the things that we'll do before the games is we'll walk around as we're starting to warm the goalies up, and I'll say, okay, like in the women's game, where I'm at the center hash. Theoretically, hopefully the goal is right behind me. But when I get down to the hanging hash, what's around me, so they get a general idea. But by that point, they're already so comfortable in the cage, they kind of know where they are. The biggest reason why we do it is we have what we call panic lines. And for those of you taking notes out there, this is a great thing to write down. We have what we call panic lines, and it just kind of helps the goalie know when to leave the pipe. So someone's crease rolling or whatever. So when you can step away from pipe, because what we see a lot is the goalies, whether they're taught a semicircle arc or the old school like 5-step or 7-step house theory, we see them step up quite a bit. So it actually leaves the near side pipe open. So what we do is we teach them panic lines. So we'll go and I will stand at the part of the field where that goalie takes up the cage. At that point, shoulders are equal with the sidebars. Okay, now what's right over my head? So, we're looking for something big, a light pole, the press box, whatever. And so that goalie knows as someone's crease rolling, when they get equal to whatever that landmark is, okay, now I need to leave the pipe. And we've seen huge returns on that because we don't see the goalie jumping out too early. And now you give up the dreaded near side shot.
Yeah.
But you also don't hug the pipe too long, and then they got a nice little shot to the far pipe.
Yep.
So, but that's something we do every game is we'll go both ends of the field and walk the panic line so the goalies get a little more comfortable.
That's smart to do it at both ends, because a lot of times you just warm up on your own end, and then when you get to the other end, you're like, oh, forgot about this end.
Yep. If we can't get there before the game, we'll do it at halftime.
Oh, wow. Cool. Going back, you mentioned sort of tongue in cheek. I had to learn the game of women's lacrosse. For, I don't know, somebody like me, for example, who has not trained many women's goalies, and I've never coached, women's lacrosse. How would you recommend I go about learning that game?
Now it's a lot easier than it was before because we've seen a lot of things that were in the men's game coming to the women's game. Everything from terminology. When I first started coaching women lacrosse, if I walked up to somebody and said the crease, a good chance I'm getting smacked or an evil eye, one of the two. It was a goal circle. It wasn't called a ride. It was called a redefend. We didn't have attack. We had a home, a first home, a second home, a third home. We didn't have defense. We had a point, a cover point, all these different kinds of things. So it's getting a lot easier now. As far as the game itself, there's the biggest differences are in transition, just because of where the midfield lines are, or where you look at for offsides, and in defense, because of some shooting space rules and 3 seconds and stuff like that. So like a traditional zone defense in men's won't work in women's. But as far as learning the game goes, honestly, the best resource that I found was not the rule book, but the official's manual, because there it breaks everything down into layman's terms. So that's where I learned quite a bit of the rules. And then nowadays, I still spend a good chunk of time flipping through drill books or looking at resources online and stuff like that. I've been in the game or this side of the game for 13 years now. And I'm still picking things up daily. As far as the goalie position goes, really is the only two things you really have to get over. There really is no such thing in women's lacrosse as a time and room shot. Yeah, sure, we have free position shots, and every once in a while you'll get somebody that will square up from 8 meters out. But unless you're playing, the top D1 teams in the country, those shooters don't really have the power to get there. The biggest thing is coaching the release point. And if there's any coaches out there that are coaching women's lacrosse, if there's one thing that you take away from this, please don't shoot on your goalie with a boy stick. Right. Please don't. Coming from somebody that has seen both, I saw my fair share of shots, and now just like jumping in drills and stuff like that, seeing the ball come out of a women's stick, it is completely and utterly different. I still to this day cannot make a save in a women's game at the crossbar. I can't do it because I think I know where that shot's going and it's 6 inches above where I think it is because the release point is so much higher coming out of a girl's stick. So please don't shoot on a girl's goalie with a boy's stick. But that was probably the biggest difference was there's no time in room shots. So you have to, work on everything is from 4 to 5 yards and in. So we spend a lot more time on reading shoulders because you don't really have the time to watch the ball all the way out on a point blank shot. So, what we tell our goalies is it's very similar to what the Goalie Smith guys teach. What we teach our goalies is the front shoulder tells you when the shot's coming. The back shoulder tells you where it's going. So is in girls, with girl sticks, it's real hard to throw a huge box fake, where you're really opening your shoulders up and you stop the ball and you bring it back. If someone's going to do a fake like that, you're going to have time to reset. You'll realize it's a fake and you reset. So when you see that front shoulder really open, the shot's coming. And then the back shoulder tells you where it's going. If their shoulder's really high, shot's going down. If their shoulder drops, they're either staying at that level or they're staying high, or they're going high. If their shoulders don't really rotate that much, they're staying that side, right? If I'm shooting on a righty, it'd be to the goalie's left side. If their shoulder's really open and that back shoulder comes around, they're shooting as a righty shot on a righty goalie, it'd be stick side. So we work on that quite a bit. I was just working with one of my freshman goalies on that yesterday. We just have her stand in the cage and we just shoot tennis balls. We hit the 4 corners, just like what Goalie Smith says, split the goal into quadrants. And we just have her point. As soon as she can see where she thinks the ball is going, just point. That's it. Just so she can work on kind of feeling, because obviously you want to watch the ball. So just feeling those shoulders. When does the front shoulder open? Shot's coming. When the back shoulder, or then the back shoulder will tell you where it's going. Normally, we don't see a whole bunch of shooters in the women's games, throwing leaners and stuff like that.
Yeah, last week, the Goalie Smith guys were at the virtual lacrosse goalie summit and taught that, that technique they call it read 'em and beat 'em. And somebody asked, hey, does this work for females? And, the consensus was, this works even better for females because unlike the male stick that has a deep pocket, you can be a little bit more deceptive with that. Like I can, as a male, sort of lean back and drop my back shoulder, but then, like I'm going to shoot it low or, at the same level and then shoot it low, or same idea. I can drop my front shoulder down, like I'm going to shoot it low, but then shoot it high. But it's harder to do that with the women's stick. Now granted, they named, a bunch of rock stars that can do it. And there's women out there that can do it, obviously, but generally speaking, it's a lot harder with the women's stick. So read them and beat them. Read them and beat them.
You're talking the top 1% of stick handlers in the game. But they're also shooting on the top 1% of goalies in the game. So. Yep.
All right. Interesting. So practice, with a women's stick, take shots with a women's stick. The shots are in close, right? So practice that a lot more. Anything else? Like, I imagine because when I did it, drills are all the same. Like a lot of the concepts are all the same. I'm curious what your take is.
Yeah, the majority of the concepts are all the same. Really, the only other one that I noticed that was significantly different was how to defend crease rolls, because so many times in men's, you do that speed dodge up from behind where they're getting a tangent to the crease and they head straight upfield. It's a little speed dodge and they turn the shoulders and shoot real fast. Where in women's lacrosse, they tend to turn the crease and get in front of the goal more. I think men don't do it because they know there's somebody coming across the crease in a coma slide that's ready to lay them out. So one of the things that took me a little bit to adjust to was that footwork, because I'm used to, hold your pipe, get big, those kinds of things, where we had to spend a lot of time working with our goalies on what the footwork is. And I watched, or I was at a clinic with Gussie Johns when she was talking about it. Gussie, the Team USA goalie, former USC goalie. She was talking about how her and Devin Wills worked on it, and there was a certain set of footwork, and it was like we talked about the panic lines. So all my goalies start in what we call a drop stance. So if the ball's on goal line extended and they're hugging the pipe, their feet are not right under them. So what we do is we'll have them get to their panic line. So they're facing that panic line. So like for myself, I'm not a big person, but I'm bigger than my goalies. I'm about 6'1", 200 pounds. My panic line happens to be the hanging hash. So a lot of my goalies, it's just under the hanging hash. But wherever their feet are when they're on that panic line, that's where their feet stay when that ball is underneath the panic line. So that way, all they kind of have to do is just turn their shoulders a little bit as they come up. They don't actually have to move their feet. But we worked on, hey, the first step is kind of up and around the arc. Then you have a second step straight to the middle of the field. And if they get to the middle of the field at that point, it's a race to the backside pipe, because they don't have the option to shoot backside at that point because your body's there. So it's a race to the front side pipe. Make them actually have to stop and reach all the way back around you. And at that point, if they still have the time to get that shot off, at that point, you start having a conversation with your defense, because no one should have 4 seconds standing on the crease. Mm-hmm. So that one was a little bit different. You just don't see a lot of men's offensive shooters that are willing to come all the way up from behind the crease and wrap all the way around it, because normally by then someone has let them know that they're not welcome there by then.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of like, the equivalent maybe in the men's game is throwing 3 fakes right on the crease, right? Mm-hmm. Like at that point, like you need to have a conversation with your defense, because no one should be able to fake score on you like that. Like maybe one, all right, we can get away with one. But then by that time, like,
yeah, somebody's paying the price.
He should feel the heat. Yeah, exactly. He should be knocked on his butt. So yeah, that's kind of a interesting point. So while you're there, you've got 2 All-Americans playing for you, and not at the same time, but who have come through the program. What makes them so great, do you think?
So my first one was Doreen. I give that girl a lot of credit. We were stuck in a position where we didn't have a goalie in our first year. We had one that, due to injury, had to medically retire. And so it's like the first week of practice and we don't have a goalie. And she was a soccer goalie in high school. So she was like, hey, I'll give it a shot. And she actually ended the season with like a 57% save percentage. And she played with a reckless abandon. I mean, this is a girl that would, if she got caught out of position, she is completely and utterly laying out to stop the ball with her body. She actually probably one of the few people that will be named an All-American in 2 different positions, because she was an All-American goalie as a freshman and All-American attacker as a junior. Wow. Doreen, just carefree, just the typical, like, hey, they say, good goalies are crazy. Well, Doreen was crazy in a good way, but that girl had no problem doing whatever it took. And then the next 2 years, the next year we had a freshman goalie come in that was named an All-American as a freshman and sophomore, Rachel Kidwell. And Rachel was the exact and utter opposite. Rachel was really small in the cage. I mean, she was like 5'2", very athletic build. But she was mathematical. She was very, very rarely ever caught out of position. And she had a work ethic like no one I've ever seen before. And this is a girl that lived about 2 hours away from campus. And even in the summer, she would drive down at least once, normally twice a week. She would work out on the field for an hour by herself and then call me, hey, coach, I'm on campus. Do you want to come shoot? And we'd shoot for another 2 hours. Wow. So very much a rhythm goalie. We used to have to, when she was here, we'd have to get to games super early because she wanted to see somewhere around 250 to 300 shots before a game.
Wow.
So yeah, just an absolute master of her craft. She was fully devoted to it. So very different styles with Rachel and Doreen, but they were incredibly effective.
Awesome. Love it. Going back, I'm just checking my notes here. Going back, I got 2 other questions. Going back, you've started, I guess now 2 programs. Is that right?
Started, let's see, 1, 2, 3. I'll say 3.5. Okay. So I started my high school program. I was there when we started the college program. I started it here at Georgetown. And then the girls program that I was at before I was here at Georgetown, we'll call it, we restarted it. Because before I was there, it was kind of a club program. They had, 25, 30 girls in the program. And after my 4 years as the head coach, my last year, in 2013, we went 26-1. The one game we lost was to St. Agnes in Virginia, who's a top 10 national team. And don't get me wrong, they absolutely steamrolled us. But I think I had 14 kids on that roster that went to go play college ball. 5 went to go play D1, including we had one girl that started as a sophomore at Notre Dame. I had 3 that went to Louisville. 1 went to Furman. And then a lot of talented D2 and D3 players. So we'll say we restarted that program.
Yeah. So, I mean, those results speak for themselves. I mean, you've been able to build up programs. I guess the question I have for you is how do you do it? What are the tips you have for people who are, maybe let's say their high school doesn't have a team, but they've played lacrosse. How do you build up a program?
Don't take no for an answer.
Don't take no for an answer.
It was a struggle in high school to start our program. It took us a little bit to really get it off the ground. And because at that point it was, finances weren't great in my town, and they were very clear that they were not going to support another varsity team. They were actually talking about cutting all JV teams. So myself and the 2 other gentlemen that I started the program with, Mike Montenegro and Anthony Carr, we spent a lot of time fundraising, and we were completely self-funded through donations for the first 2 years. And then we were lucky enough we put a lot of work in, but we were lucky enough to help somebody, to find somebody that was going to coach us. His name was Lee Penny. Anybody in the state of Connecticut knows who Lee Penny is. He is absolutely the godfather of lacrosse up there. That had done it quite a few times, started programs and quite a few well-known programs. So like Summers High School, which is once you get out of Fairfield County, where Darien and all those phenomenal high school programs are. Once you get out of Fairfield County, I'd put Summers, at least when I was up there, as one of the top teams in the state, especially for a public school. And he kind of had this plan, and so we were very, very diligent in our work. There was very rarely a question that somebody asked us that we didn't have the answer ready to go, whether it was how we were going to travel, who we were going to play, who was going to coach us, where we were going to practice, where we were going to get equipment from, all that kind of stuff. Probably the biggest thing was the cost, trying to find these kids that are going to try a new sport and have to pay for gloves, elbow pads, shoulder pads, helmets, sticks, all this kind of stuff. So what we did, I don't even know if they do it anymore, but we actually went to all the big retailers and said, hey, what do you have of leftovers? Stuff that you really don't want sitting on the market anymore, but that are just sitting in a warehouse somewhere. And sure enough, we found Brian / Warrior, had this whole bunch of stuff. So we essentially bought it at cost. So as a brand new program, we actually were able to supply all the equipment for every one of our kids. So that was huge. But yeah, I would definitely say just no matter when one door closes, just keep going, because there will be somebody, especially in the lacrosse community, because the lacrosse world is so small and tight knit and so family oriented, somebody will help you.
Yeah.
So that'd probably be the biggest thing. Don't get me wrong, I could go on for a while, but I know you don't want a serious podcast.
Yeah, right. It's not the Tim what's it, Joe Rogan 6 hour podcasts.
Yeah, no.
The final question I have is at the beginning you mentioned like you were so into the stats.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about that. What stats are you tracking? How do you analyze those stats to determine, I don't know if it's practices or drills we need to do. And then if I'm a goalie looking to get into, this is all brand new to me, like stats, like what would be your advice to them?
So what we look at is, even in games, we track everything. So, we're looking up to 3 goalies in the program. So our second and third string goalies keep different stats with them, but then when we put them together, it starts telling an incredible story. So like one stat sheet will say every goal we give up, what was going on outside the crease. So it was, was it a fast break, a slow break, a settled goal? Was it a free position shot? Were we man up, man down? And then where on the field did the shot come from? Was it below the hanging hashes? Was it in the spot, which is that, like the centered island, the 5 yard by 5 yard box right in front of the goal? Was it on the islands? Was it, out real far? And then the other one was what happens in the crease. Physically, where on the goal, where was the shot? Did we get a piece of it? Did it roll in? Was it, did we completely fall for it? Are we going stick side low and all of a sudden this thing comes up over our other shoulder? And then we number them all. So we can go back and be like, all right, goal number 2 was a fast break shot coming down the alley to the far side pipe. Okay, what happened? And so we can look through all that. All of our goalie individuals, we videotape and we send everything all through Huddle so the girls can watch it. We put, the notations and all that kind of stuff on it. And we analyze everything from what happens right before the shot or the save, hopefully, to everything after. So we spend just as much time analyzing once the ball's in your stick, what do you do with it? How quickly did you get through your read progressions in the clear? And then, okay, you decided to throw it to this person. Why this person? Where should you have put that ball? And dealing with, if you put it over this shoulder, how many different people can come get a play on it? What's the percentage of that happening? Versus you put it over this shoulder. And then what's the difference between driving that ball, or the terminology we use is drive versus is wedge or lob. Are you throwing it on the frozen rope, or are you putting some arc under it to let somebody run underneath it? So as far as getting into it, it's all film because there's so many different things. You can probably pick up 4 to 5 times as much information watching the same thing back again than you did watching it live. So nowadays everybody's got a phone or a camera in their pocket. Just set it up and go through a warm-up because your warm-up will tell you quite a bit about what you do. And that's why we put so much emphasis on goalies designing their own warm-up. Everybody's different. What makes you the best version of you? So that's probably my biggest sticking point anytime we talk about goalies is, or the first time I talk with a goalie that I'm working with, whether it's, one of ours or camp, clinic, whatever. What's your warm-up is the first one. And then who designed it? Did you actually come up with what you do? Or was it a coach saying, all right, we're going to do 5 shots there, 5 shots there, 5 shots there, mix them up and then you're done. So, because what worked for me 15 years ago is not necessarily going to work for my goalies now. I talked about Rachel, my All-American, a couple years ago. She graduated in 2017 or 2019. Her sophomore year was the best example. We had 3 goalies on the roster. Rachel wanted to see 250 to 300 shots before a game. She was good. My backup, Sarah, was very unorthodox. She wanted to see like 2 or 3 in each spot, 10 anywhere, and she was done, but she was going to go jump rope and do speed ladders. And probably the most unique thing that I'd never heard of, but once she explained it to me, makes a whole bunch of sense. She would actually come down to the field before the rest of the team, and she would put a ball on the bench 20 yards away from her. And she would stare at the ball the entire time, never break her focus, but she would say hello to everybody as they walked down the field. She was working on observing everything that was around her without ever leaving her, without ever her focus leaving the ball. So she had to look in her peripherals and see who's coming down the field and recognize who it was. I'd never heard of that. And it worked really well for her. And then my third string was like, I want to see 10 shots and I'm good.
Yeah.
So everybody's different.
Love it. Well, good luck. Are you guys having a season this year?
Yeah. It's just, we've been hit really hard with just having to deal with COVID. And then the weather, out here in the Midwest, we had a couple storms coming through back to back and wiped everything out. So normally by now we played 7-8 games, but we've had 1 this year.
Right.
So, and then we had to postpone some because we had a good chunk of our team had to go into contact tracing quarantine. So we're looking we should be able to kick the season back off. We've been practicing, but our next game should hopefully be March 20th, kicking off conference play, and then we'll go from there.
Cool. I love it. Well, Coach, thank you. Coach Brandon Davis, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was tons of fun. And if people want to get a hold of you, where should they go?
Probably social media is the best route. So all of our social medias, anything you can think of, is just GC_lacrosse. everything. Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, you name it. That's it.
I love it. You're on that TikTok too. I have to jump over there.
Yeah, full disclosure, I don't run that. Our team has an account. I don't run it, but a message will get to me if there's one there. I promise you.
I love it. Well, that was tons of fun. I always ask at the end, if you could leave those goalies out there with one last piece of advice, what would that be?
Do what you do. Don't let anybody try to tell you you're wrong. I think there are 5,000 ways to play goalie, and 3,000 of them are right. Do what works for you. Just become incredible at it.
Awesome. Brandon, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.